एक नया इतिहास लिखेंगे.
Namaskar. Under the series Makers of Modern India of Lok Jagar channel, we are today looking after one most important aspect of Sayajirao, that is Sayajirao as the finance minister, the best finance minister. Actually, barring some exceptions, the Maharajas of India were known for their extravaganza and earthly pleasures beyond limits. Many books are written on this, but Maharaja Sayajirao was not only an exception, but he was numero uno. His approach was human and he always thought of welfare of the public. In those days, he was not answerable to public, but he has taken all the welfare measures on his own. The welfare state is not possible without the economic well-being of the state. When Sayajirao Maharaj was nominated as the king of Baroda, the state was under huge debt and deficit and a victim of total mismanagement. As a benevolent king, the first and foremost challenge of Sayajirao was to streamline the administration and improve the economic condition of the state. That too at the tender age of 18 years only. He first streamlined the administration, fixed the responsibility of revenue collection, trimmed the undue expenditure, and personally looked into the financial affairs of the state to the micro level. He strictly instructed to all the heads to prepare budget for their department and scrupulously adhered to it. Corruption was rampant in those days also. Maharaja curbed it with iron hands. The brunt of budgeting expenditure control was faced by his nearest relatives and family members too. What he has done is not visible in today's democratic setup also. He initiated the steps for development of agricultural sector being a agro-based economy which paid the huge dividends, of course. Like our current politicians, he didn't increase the taxes to augment the revenue. On the contrary, he reduced the tax burden. His main thrust was plugging the leakages of revenue, control of expenditure and corruption in the system, and strict vigilance of financial system. There are numerous instances of stopping the public welfare schemes in our current democratic setup under the garb of expenditure control. But Sayajirao was the prudent economist. Instead of cutting the expenditure on welfare and developmental schemes, he increased the expenditure. One interesting example is the populist and most unproductive scheme of his predecessors, that is, daily distribution of rice and dal to purohits for khichdi. The beneficiaries used to sell it immediately to the grocery shops. It was promoting not only the inequality but laziness also. Sayaji Maharaj stopped this worthless expenditure but didn't forget to make a provision for the deserving and real needy persons. It saved the huge expenditure of the state. His micro control on expenditure was to the extent of checking the raw material required for the kitchen of king himself. He thought his thoughtful control stopped the pilferages and undue extravaganza and reduced the raw material being used considerably. During his regime, the expenditure of every single paise was to be duly approved by the competent authority, was to be appropriately recorded in government documents. He started independent audit department in 1884 within 2 years of taking the charge of state. He didn't spared his own brother also when he defaulted to pay the loan of Baroda state. Maharaja ordered to attach his personal library to the state. His fiscal discipline was harsh enough like this. He didn't allow his own nephew to extend his education in foreign country. Instead, he advised him to return back to state and join the state service. However, he broke his own rules and extended the scholarship to Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar for his education in foreign countries. He was generous enough to allow him not to pay back the amount of scholarship and freed him from mandatory services in the Baroda state. He was considerate enough on the ground that Dr. Ambedkar was doing a great job of emancipation of the backward classes. For economic development of the state, he built so many roads, railways, ports, industries, banks, credit cooperative societies, etc. He built dams, lakes, wells for giving boost to the agro production, modernized the agricultural sector by providing modern farm equipments, tractors, pumps, and even electricity also. He was amongst the rarest kings who built dams in India in those days. Chhatrapati Shahu Maharaj, Krishnaraj Wadiyar, and very few were the other rulers in those days to do so. His own children were not the exception to his very strict financial discipline. They were not sanctioned money for their personal expenditure unless they submit the accounts of previous expenditure. Also, it never crossed the pre-decided limit. He reduced the number of his personal servants from 400 to 40 only, but he never axed them. He adjusted them in other departments. He formulated a policy to save some amount, substantial amount of course, every year to build up a reserve fund. He advises that state should have a reserve fund equivalent to budget of or revenue of 4 years plus 20 lakhs for the provision of drought relief. How many finance ministers of modern day India are having this kind of wisdom? On the contrary, our governments are under huge debts today. To revamp the account department of Baroda state, he appointed an accomplished person in this field in 1892, that is just after taking over the reins of Baroda, 10 years after taking over the reins of Baroda. He was Babu Rajaninath Roy, and he was the officer from British government and accomplished officer from the British government. Sayajirao was of the view that only agro-based economy cannot lead to the state of prosperity. It needs sufficient industrialization also. He expressed these views in many of his speeches. That is why his government provided a support of 80 lakhs from 1914 to 1920 for the industrial development of his state. Naturally, the number of industries in his state increased from 86 to 124 within a span of 10 years. That is from 1911 to 1921. The well-known Alembic Pharma group of modern India was started in Baroda state only. He supported the industrialization by formulating the suitable acts like Companies Act 1897, Boiler Act 1898, Factories Act 1915, etc. These are the foundation of various acts of modern India. He also arranged first agro and industrial exhibitions in India in 1923. For the first time in Indian princely states, he started the system of procurement and contract by calling quotations or floating the tenders and made it completely transparent. He never taxed the food items in his states and had a policy to keep the taxes on industrial product to the lowest possible level. He stopped the system of collection of revenue from the farmers by the sardars of the state, which was prevalent before his period. His untiring efforts and prudent fiscal policies made his state one of the richest in the world. Had the governments of modern day India followed the financial model of Sayajirao Maharaj, which is still relevant, India would have been a much more better country in many respects. Thanks.
एक नया इतिहास लिखेंगे।